Just give us a little background to these wind talks that were held, of course, yesterday, and who's participating in the discussions.
Well, we see Namibia as being quite promising for wind energy. When I say we, I mean Vestas, but also a lot of other people in Namibia. So we talked to some people at the Polytechnic and some people who are doing taking a deeper look into the possibilities of wind, and we decided to basically try to get everybody together. That would be the government, the regulator, the utility, developers, financiers, NGOs, and really examine what's the situation now, where are they at, and what's needed to take a few more steps, and try to get as technical and as detailed as possible so that we could try to come up with some sort of direction or pathway for the industry.
Before we go anywhere, I mean, how viable is wind power in Namibia versus, say, South Africa and the Eastern Cape?
Well, the resources are there. You have wind mapping has been done, sites have been identified, you've got developers who are interested. The regulator has handed out licenses to some of these developers as independent power producers. So the building blocks, so to speak, are in place. Getting access to financing doesn't appear to be a problem. So the question now is what is needed to take the next step and to make these things happen.
As you say, 2 licenses awarded to 2 wind farms. What is the size of these projects?
They're in, I think, the 40 to 60 megawatt range at this point, but we're at the stage where it's probably too early to say this is exactly how much is going to be produced by these, because that would probably require some more detailed work done on looking at the winds and measuring them more specifically, but I would say 40 to 60 megawatts.
At this point in time, negotiations appear to be stuck between developers and the Electronic Controls Board. What is the sticking point in terms of these 2 projects?
Well, I think there's a couple of issues that I think are actually quite, to be expected, quite commonplace that you'll find in other markets that are beginning to integrate wind energy. I mean, one of the issues that always comes up is the power purchase agreement. What is, in fact, going to be the specific agreement between the developer, the producer, and the off-taker, which in this case would be, I guess, NamPower. That's one issue. And there are other issues around integration of wind energy into the national grid, and those can get quite technical as well. So a company like Vestas is able to actually step in because we've done this in dozens of countries around the world, and we've seen the industry in different stages and different levels of maturity, and be able to come in and say, well, this is what's been done in other countries, and here's some models, or here's some best practices that you can apply to Namibia to see if you can get past this next hurdle.
In terms of opportunities for wind in the country, as you say, you've gone through the whole process throughout the world. That's a process we went through in South Africa. But in terms of the contribution that wind can ultimately make to the country's energy needs, we've got a deficit at this point in time. Electricity demand sitting at around 550 megawatts, and a current installed capacity just above 380 megawatts. That's going to grow with the uranium boom, oil, the latest oil find, increased economic activity. What type of contribution can wind energy make to this deficit?
Well, I think wind can definitely make a contribution. I mean, we heard from quite a few stakeholders yesterday that there's both a short-term need, and of course, it remains to be seen what the specific longer-term need is going to be. But I mean, there's pretty much agreement that the demand is going up. It's going to go up fairly steadily, and it's going to go up fairly steadily for quite some time. Wind, of course, is not going to provide a majority of the energy in Namibia, but wind should be in the energy mix for a couple of really good reasons. One is that it's a resource that Namibia owns. It's free. It's theirs to take, which means that they're not buying imported fuel. They're not subject to the volatility of international fuel prices. They're not reliant on people with whom they have agreements to import power. So it's very much, I think, a tool that they can use and they can control themselves to put into the energy mix. And of course, the other fact is that it's a renewable energy source, and that's always a good thing to have. The government is clearly interested in renewable energy. Everybody is interested in seeing if wind can be added to the mix. And Namibia is also quite water stressed, and wind requires virtually no water whatsoever. So that's also quite an attractive selling point.
As you say, really at the beginning, though, of developing the wind sector in the country, is there a timeline in terms of when we might see the first unit of energy being produced by a wind farm? And what is the next step from here?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't want to put a date on it because I think that's really why we're here, is to look at what needs to be done, and depending on the answer to that question, that would determine your timeline. I think everybody agrees that these projects need to be looked at more carefully, and that's really where you would start with these two proposals, and see how far they can be taken, and see what kind of other issues emerge, and that I think would also help to determine, okay, what's the longer term future for wind energy in Namibia.
Andrew, so very much in the beginning phases there, just very quickly looking at South Africa's renewable energy sector, because of course Vestas extremely involved in setting that up. Are we likely to see contracts being awarded for the first renewable energy producers by the time COP takes place at the end of the year?
I would not dare to predict the outcome of the tendering process in South Africa. But I think the timeline they've got clearly shows that they'd like to have something in hand when COP starts. So let's hope that that's the case, yes.